excited for Ryan Clarke to join us. He covers the Oregon Ducks and the Big Ten for the Oregonian, also co-host of the Soccer Made and PDX podcast and Ducks Confidential podcast. Find him on Twitter at Ryan T. Clarke. There's an E at the end of that Clarke, by the way. Make sure you give him a follow. He's great. He's covering multiple things here, and he joins us now. Ryan, good morning. Thanks for hopping on with us. I know it's really early, so I appreciate the time. We were talking about just hiring Nick Saban as a college football czar and saying, hey, man, can you fix this, please? It's a growing sport and in many ways feels very broken. What's your read on college football right now as they're already talking about expansion of a playoff, even though they haven't even started the next expansion of their playoff?
Yeah, I mean, college football as an institution is rapidly changing with so much money going around, and a positive aspect is that a portion of that money is now finally going to the players who have made all of this happen over the last several decades. But at the same time, the institution in general is in a very strange spot and is in peril in some ways. Look, I mean, there are schools that are getting left behind as these super conferences get put together. You know, I cover the Oregon Ducks, but you think about what has happened to the Oregon State Beavers and other schools who, if they don't join these special conferences and their alliances and everything else, then, they sort of get left behind and left by the wayside. And college football obviously is the driver for revenue for all of these schools, right? It's what allows them to be profitable or at least break even because of just the sheer interest and the money going around there. And right now, like with the expanded playoff, if you're not in that sort of inner circle in one of those elite super conferences, if you will, it's difficult to get in even with the expansion. And, the balance in the coming years for college football is going to be about, caring about a quality product that keeps tradition at the forefront while also, of course, dealing with what is very obviously a profit motive here to keep this thing profitable for the people involved.
So it's about the almighty dollar at this point and not in the best interest maybe of fans and the sport itself. You also do the Soccer Made and PDX podcast. I think people were excited that you were going to continue that on, even though you're covering, as you mentioned, the Ducks and the Big Ten here. Timber season's about to kick off. It's a new regime, a new moment. They haven't made the playoffs in 2 years. How are we feeling about the Timbers going into the season?
The Timbers themselves are optimistic. Fans on the outside are, I think, warily optimistic, right? The idea being that, year in and year out, the Timbers talk a lot about, I think we were better than our results last year. So this year is the real test of whether that's true because they've got Phil Neville coming in as the new head coach. Came in under a bit of controversy with the fans not necessarily wanting his hire due to some sexist tweets that he posted several years ago. But he introduced himself to the community, and look, the players around the Timbers organization, when you talk to them and even the people that work in the organization, they're excited about this sort of new era. Obviously, several years of success under Gio Savarese, but Phil Neville comes in, a few new signings. Kamal Miller, center back, is somebody that they're excited about. Goalkeeper Maxime Crepeau, who comes to the Timbers by way of LAFC. They're excited about him as well. And then the big hype last few days, particularly at Media Day for the Timbers, was a new designated player striker that's on the way for them. No name yet, but essentially the only rumor we've seen has been Jonathan Rodriguez, a 30-year-old Uruguayan striker from Club America in Mexico. So a lot of moving parts. Roster has changed a bit from last year, not necessarily as stagnant as maybe the roster's been in previous years. So they're excited, and look, they want to make the playoffs and think that they have the guns to do it.
Ryan, in watching this, I was one of those people that was very skeptical about Neville coming in, but he had some decent success with the women's national team in England. Do you think, as things fell apart last season, do you think Neville will be the bigger change for this team, or does it simply break down to the new designated players coming in? Is it more of a player thing? Because it sounded like Gio's message kind of was getting lost. Is Neville the right guy to push it, or does this team just really need a roster revamp?
I think it's definitely a mix. I think that Neville could be that guy for sure. He hasn't had necessarily a proven track record in MLS yet. Obviously, with Inter Miami, they struggled, and he was fired mid-season before they eventually brought in Tata Martino to coach Inter Miami. And of course, we all know all the other folks that showed up at Miami with Messi and all his buddies
All
down
his
there.
pals.
All of his pals who are taking over MLS. But yeah, I mean, I think it's in part, how Neville meshes with these guys, how his system fits the current roster and the roster that he inherited from GS Everese. But I do think that a change in personnel was absolutely necessary, and I think that the Timbers patched up some of those areas. Now, the DP striker, the amount of hype around him has been pretty real from the people in the Timbers organization over the last few days. Who it ends up being and how they end up contributing, we'll see. But that's the biggest change, is having a lethal goal scorer up top, which has not necessarily been the case over the last couple of years. You pair him with a guy like Evander, who they brought in for a club record signing in the midfield, and they solidified the back line with Miller and then Crepeau in goal. So if they stay healthy and Neville meshes well with this group, yeah, I think that they definitely could get into the playoffs and make a solid run. But all the chips have to fall a certain way, and in MLS they rarely do. So
Ryan Clarke is our guest here, Oregonian, OregonLive.com. He covers the Ducks and the Big Ten for the Oregonian. Also still co-hosting the Soccer Made in PDX podcast.
Listener,
and,
right here, listener of that
P1s
podcast.
and Ducks Confidential podcast as well. Find him on Twitter at Ryan T. Clarke.
And Ryan, I'll get you out on this Timbers note. Fan favorites, for me at least, obviously Diego Chara. I hope we build a statue of him outside one day. And I've always been a longtime Eric Williamson fan. The injuries are obviously a massive concern, especially when you think about his potential for the U.S. national team. Looking at that defensive midfield there, as Chara's getting older and as Williamson is coming off another bad injury, where does your faith lie between those two in terms of production?
Right, and in terms of how Neville envisions this roster, one of his biggest challenges is going to be who to play in central midfield and where to play them. Right, Evander slotted in more as a number 10, as an attacking midfielder, and that's probably where he's best suited behind an elite striker. But he liked to drop back a bit as well, and so you think about a guy like Williamson, who's been primarily a defensive midfielder for the Timbers. He's talked recently about how Neville has him playing everywhere, basically up and down the field. So that could change game to game for Eric. I think Eric's fully healthy and really excited about this year, and could be one of Portland's most important players. How he meshes with Char will be interesting. I think that the most likely situation would be him paired with Diego as the sort of 6 and 8 for the Timbers in the starting lineup. And then you think about other players like Christian Paredes or is going to be in the mix. He was a supporters player of the year last year and started the majority of the games, and he was really productive. And David Ajala is coming back from injury, young Argentine player who they're really excited about, but didn't get a chance at that last year due to those injuries. So it's crowded at the position, but I do think that the Timbers can make it work and have no shortage of talent there. The question will obviously be, is Diego Chara going to continue to be the ageless wonder that he's been in the last few years? I mean, the guy said he wants to play till he's 40 and is showing no signs of slowing down. So it'll be interesting to see how all of those players fit together. But I do think that Diego Chara and Eric Williamson are probably the most likely to start in that area of the field.
Ryan, we were hoping to get you on more and more as the year goes on. College football, we know you're covering the Ducks and the Big Ten. Get you out of here on this. Coach, right now, February 22nd, I ask you, coach, that you're most looking forward to talking to at B1G Media Day is who in football?
Wow. I would honestly, it's funny that I would pick this given that they're the team that I cover, but I'm just excited to meet Dan Lanning. I look forward to seeing behind the curtain there and and sort of getting a true picture of the vision that he's got, because
Bring cigars.
I'll bring the cigars for sure, because the guy, what he's building down in Oregon is genuinely exciting. I'm excited to hear from Ryan Day too. I think that Ohio State is probably the odds-on favorite in the Big Ten, other than maybe the Ducks next season, and to hear from him as the conference changes and these new schools like Oregon, Washington come in and want to compete. And then Michigan, of course, having to deal with the post Harbaugh era. Like, I'm interested to hear what he has to say. So it's an exciting time for the Ducks, frankly, and I think that going into the Big Ten, they have a real chance to compete and potentially win the conference right out of the gate.
Do me a favor, get some water and rub it on Ryan Day's beard. We need to get this dye job off of it. That man needs to accept that he's got grays in his hair. It's okay. Ryan Clarke, our guest, OregonLive.com, Oregonian covering the Ducks, Big Ten, and of course, still doing Soccer Made and PDX with a Timbers preview as well on Twitter at Ryan T. Clarke. Ryan, thanks for the time, man, this morning. We always appreciate it, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right, there we go. Ryan Clarke, Oregonian, OregonLive.com.